My name's Robert Briggs, and the business is Crimson Crab Ltd, and what we do is specialise in helping businesses understand their compliance requirements and taking steps to address those compliance requirements. Well, as a compliance specialist, I always think that mediation is a great way of actually achieving a decent result. So I'm very happy to support International Mediation Awareness Week. I think it's a great initiative. And our business really helps mediation businesses to understand what their risks are in terms of how they comply with legislation, because mediation by its very nature is a business and needs to be operated as one. Regulatory compliance is a significant business issue, partly because of the ever-increasing number of regulations and rules and things out there. They require businesses to be vigilant and understand the things that apply to them. So there might be industry-specific areas of legislation they need to comply with, but there also is plenty of legislation out there from the government. And particularly while we're talking about Brexit, there are changes in the legislation. So people need to understand what those changes are and how it affects their business. So let me give you an example. There's lots of legislation around how your data is protected, the Data Protection Act. I mean, it's very important that businesses understand their obligations under that and know that they have to do something to make their compliance valid and robust. Well, it's really about demonstrating to an outside body. So in the, for the case of data protection, we go back to the Information Commissioner's office. They have the power to scrutinise your business. So what you've got to demonstrate is that you know what the legislation, how the legislation applies to your business, what the risks are from that particular piece of legislation, and what you will do to make sure that you don't fall foul of those risks. So in terms, I'm sorry to keep using data protection as an example, but it is a nice, easy one. Essentially, what you're looking at there is, if you handle personal data, do you store it robustly? Do you have a system in place to make sure that you don't store it for longer than is necessary? So they're just examples of things that you need to know about. And then assessing your standing against those particular criteria and demonstrating that to outside scrutiny. Well, this really is about having a system in place. It's linked to the previous step, but it's having that system in place which flags up when something occurs where there is a regulatory compliance risk in your business. So it's about looking at what is foreseeable that can go wrong, what is foreseeable that may cause you to have a regulatory failure, if you like. And how do you deal with that once that actually happens? So, you know, is there a person in the organisation that's responsible for that particular area? Does that person keep an eye on things? Do they have feedback from members of staff saying, look, this is an issue area? It's all of those good areas of feedback which actually develop the regulatory compliance process in the business. Most of the legislation that applies to businesses doesn't require mens rea, i.e. guilty knowledge, to have an impact on that business. So you don't have to even know that you've broken the law, you just have to break the law. And as soon as you've broken the law, then the regulator can look at your business and, as I say, go down the route of prosecution if necessary and taking action. Where those types of legislation are in place, where there is an absolute offence, there is always a two-part defence, and the first element of that two-part defence is to take reasonable precautions. So that means doing something, having a system in place which tries to prevent that happening. So here a good example is a food business that has fridges. What would be a reasonable precaution in that food business is to have a thermometer which is recording the temperature of the cold cabinet storage, to make sure that that temperature is the correct temperature for the product storage. So that's a simple example. In the data protection world, it might be a system to monitor incoming requests from people to obtain their data from you. due diligence is the second part of the defence. So once you have a system in place, so you've got your thermometer in the freezer, it's about making sure that actually that's working. So you would make sure, for example, that the thermometer isn't broken, but you'd also be recording the temperatures so that you can demonstrate that the process is working, the refrigerator is maintaining the correct temperature. So it's that ongoing continuous improvement. You're always looking to make sure that your process is working and it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. And what I always say is, if a regulator does look at your business, it's always much better to say to them, what else can I do, rather than what can I do? Because as soon as you say, what can you do, it goes back to that first point that we made. You don't know what the risks are. If you're saying, what else can I do? What it's demonstrating to the regulator is that you've done something and you're just not quite there. And they're much more likely to be on your side to make improvements, rather than saying, we need to start again with your business. And that may lead to enforcement action. Well, a great starting point from my perspective is our business MOT, which actually looks at a number of areas of business. And it goes from things like insurance through to, well, we deal with data protection, terms and conditions, those sort of things. And what our business MOT does is actually give people a chance to step back and think about their business. And I do the business MOT with them. So there's plenty of opportunity to ask questions and you know, explore particular topic areas more thoroughly. But failing that, you know, the place to look is the news to understand what's changing. At the moment, I think it's pretty regular that there are changes going on. Data protection is a particular issue area. There are lots of breaches of the regulations from big companies every day. The smaller companies breaking the legislation don't necessarily get reported, but they're still investigated.